aboard here. Sports Talk Nation, Michael Cohen here with you, and we got to get back to talking about some Mets baseball. What a wild week this has been. What a wild road trip this has been, going to Oakland, going to L.A., and of course today, one of the wildest games we have seen from the Mets this year, as Max Scherzer gets tossed from the game in the fourth inning for what was alleged a foreign substance on his pitching hand. And as has been described by Scherzer, we're going to play a little bit of that video from the postgame in a minute. Scherzer pleading his case that it was nothing illegal on his hand, that all he had on his hand was sweat and rosin. And according to the rules, rosin is legal. Pitchers can use rosin on their hands. Sometimes they end up getting on their gloves. But as Scherzer describes, when you mix sweat, and Scherzer's a guy who is, as we all know, sweats very profusely, and rosin together, it causes, as he described, kind of a clumpiness on his hands and gets kind of sticky. He then goes into describing how he was asked to wash it a couple of times. He's had the umpires watching over him, even in after the third inning, to make sure that he had cleansed his hand and then reapplied the rosin back onto his hand, and still ended up getting tossed from the game on Wednesday afternoon. It was a wild scene.
Well, no, he said my hand's too sticky. I said, Phil, that's sweat and rosin. There's sweat and rosin. I kept repeating, it's sweat and rosin. I swear on my life, it's sweat and rosin. Like, I knew I was going to get checked. Like I said, I'd have to be an absolute idiot to use anything else. I'd literally go out there with sweat and rosin. I get ejected.
So there's Max Scherzer talking about his ejection from the game on Wednesday. Now, of course, there's always two sides to any story, and then, of course, the umpires came out and had their thoughts about what happened, led by crew chief Dan Bellino and, of course, Phil Cuzzi himself, and they called Scherzer's hand the stickiest, and this is from Bellino, the stickiest that he had ever seen. And then their quote from Cuzzi, you'll see it here, and I'll just read it to you. So when he came in, I checked his hand and his glove, and I checked his pitching hand. It was slightly sticky, a little tacky. It was dark in color, which isn't really a surprise. So when I looked at him, he says, no, it's just rosin. I'm going to wash it off. I said, okay, got to wash it off, and I'm going to check it when you come back out, and there better be nothing on there. So obviously, they checked him a couple of times, and then they checked him again in the fourth inning. They checked his glove and felt that it was still too sticky, and Scherzer gets ejected. Now, is rosin legal? Yes, as I mentioned before, it is legal to use rosin, especially when it's on the mound. There is a stipulation rule that says you can't use rosin again. Let's say in the clubhouse, for that matter, you really can't do that and then come out. That would be considered illegal. But so it's a very convoluted rule, and from just gathering the information over the last day now, which is why this video is coming out a little bit later. It's a rule that seems to be confusing to some people, but it's been a tough year here to start for Max Scherzer. Not just from the injury that kept him out, that bumped him from his start on Sunday, which is the reason why he started on Wednesday, but a very slow start for him for the start of this year. And even the game on Wednesday, labored a little bit at the start of the game, 25 pitches to get out of the first inning, and then picked it up and pitched much better in the second and third innings. It's a shame that he had to leave the game so early, and it's a shame that he got stuck, lack of a better phrase for that matter, got stuck in a sticky situation with his hand, and now he's facing a situation where he's going to be suspended 10 games. You would imagine that'd be at least one, maybe two starts. He could still appeal that suspension, and perhaps pitch when the Mets return but perhaps later in this series against the Giants, if not next week when the Mets return to Citi Field. But losing him in a situation where the Mets starting rotation is already thin is a concern. Now, the Mets have been playing good baseball here over the last week now, going back to the end of that San Diego series, winning that series at home against the San Diego Padres, going on the road, beating up on the soon-to-be Las Vegas A's in Oakland. And you could sit there and scuff saying, "Oh, it's the A's; they're a terrible team." I don't care. That was a big series. The Mets had to win that series, and they had to take care of business. And they even came back a couple of times and had to win games late. It was an impressive showing. I don't care. You got to win the games that are on your schedule. The Mets did just that against Oakland, and then to go into L.A. and even with the pitching not really there from the starting standpoint, to go out there and win a couple of games in L.A. very, very impressive. And that's why you have to feel good about the Mets as they head to San Francisco for a series that starts on Thursday night and continues throughout the weekend before the Mets return home. Now, as I just alluded to, if there's one thing that kind of scares me as we move forward here, coming towards the last stretch of April going into May, is the starting pitching and the concerns the Mets have that you have to have as a Met fan about the starting rotation. Obviously, with Scherzer right now, the Rosin situation with the Dodgers, but also Justin Verlander. We haven't seen him pitch in a regular season game yet this year as he's dealing with a shoulder issue or armpit issue. And he is going to be going through a rehab process still, as it probably won't throw a rehab game until, I guess, next week. And we may not see him in a major league mound until early May. So there's that concern. We're going to see him eventually, but to go through the first month of this year without Justin Verlander has been tough. Not to mention, you have Carlos Carrasco now on the injury list with an injury, as he has inflammation in his elbow, as he had, I believe it was inflammation, let me just double check that, swelling and discomfort in his right elbow. So he is out on the 15-day injury list. You have Jose Quintana, who has not pitched since the start of spring training. He's out until the middle of the year. So the Mets starting rotation has been tested. And this Mets team, as a group, has been tested with some questionable pitching as a result. David Peterson, Tyler McGill are okay, but you're asking those two guys right now to basically be number 2 and number 3 in this rotation. It's been tough for them. Really, the most consistent pitcher the Mets have had has been Kodai Senga, who has been really good. I mean, I've been impressed with what I've seen from him in 3 starts. 2-0, ERA of 3.38. Yeah, he gave up 4 runs, got charged with 4 runs in his last outing against Oakland, but overall has been impressive. The ghost fork pitch has been deadly against hitters, especially right-handed hitters. I've been impressed with him. He has really been the Mets staff ace so far this year. But it's going to be a big question mark for the Mets moving forward is, can they get this starting rotation back on track? Get these guys healthy. Get them rolling again. They need to have a healthy Verlander and Scherzer, as we know, as we move throughout the course of the summer and towards the later part of the year. That's what's the most important part. But they're going to have to, at some point, address starting pitcher, I think, as we move deeper into the season, perhaps via trade. One thing that was really cool about the start of this road trip was the way this bullpen was tested. And for the most part, they bent but didn't break. And one guy that stood out for me had to be Jimmy Yacobonis, who through 2 outings had to come in long relief. Had to come in long relief in Wednesday's game. 2 1/3 innings. Gave up only 1 run against a good Dodgers lineup. And that was after the ejection of Max Scherzer, and he settled things down. Remember, he was also on the mound in the Oakland game when that was a deadlock tie, and he also had that big catch. Brandon Nimmo helped him out with that big catch in left center field. So he has been impressive. So the Mets have been kind of looking for that guy who's going to replace Trevor Williams. I know we've been talking about trying to replace Edwin Diaz or trying to build a bridge to David Robertson, who was trying to replace Edwin Diaz at the end of the game. But Trevor Williams was a big part of this bullpen last year as the long relief man. And he would come in when starters came out early, when there was an injury, whatever it may be, and he really settled things down. Can Jimmy Yacobonis be that guy? We'll wait and see. John Curtis, those are a couple other names that the Mets are trying to feel out there to see who could be that kind of pitcher. But overall, they're getting stretched out here as the Mets are struggling to figure out how they can get this starting rotation in order. The biggest positive for me is, in addition to the fact that the bullpen has pitched fairly well, it still concerns you. You want to see the starting rotation, pitch longer, pitch deeper into games, be healthy. But when you have an offense that at one point this year, through the first 10 games, was really struggling, they were hitting .218 as a team, now has really started to come on in this road trip. And a big reason for that is Brandon Nimmo, who has seen his batting average shoot straight up. I mean, he has been unbelievable in the last week now. Right now hitting a .349, a home run, and 10 RBIs in the season. 5 for 5 in the game on Wednesday against the Dodgers, including the 2-run homer that gave the Mets the lead. He has been incredible. He has, let's see, going back to the San Diego game, game against San Diego on the 12th, 4, 5. He has hit safely in 6 of the last 7 games for the Mets. He has seen his batting average shoot up from 188, which is where it was on April 11th, to now 349. He has been the biggest reason, not just from the bat standpoint, but from the glove as well, with the incredible catches he's been making in center field. He has been the Mets' best player on the field at this point in the year. And that's with Pete Alonso putting up MVP type numbers, 8 home runs, 15 RBIs, with Francisco Lindor having a really good start to the year, 4 home runs, 17 RBIs. Even with those two guys doing exactly what we knew they needed to do, Brandon Nimmo has been the Mets' best player here so far at the start of the year. And you also got to like what you've seen from Jeff McNeil, who continues to hit the ball well, play good defense, and even starting to see Mark Canha get on fire a little bit. Also, thank goodness for the Mets bringing up Brett Beatty. Thank goodness. This guy's been killing it in AAA. 400 batting average, hit at 5 home runs, 15 RBI, something like that in AAA. And the Mets finally do what they had to do and bring this guy up. You could have made the argument that he should have been on the opening day roster, but finally to see him here at the Major League level, he's contributed with an RBI. He did it in his first game against the Dodgers. The Mets had to make a move because Eduardo Escobar just isn't hitting. He's a good clubhouse guy. He's a good leader. I like the fact that I saw on Twitter that he has Beatty. It makes it a point to have Beatty sit next to him on the bus or on the airplane. He's a terrific leader. May even be a good coach down the road as far as a position coach or a fielding coach one day down the road for Eduardo Escobar. But right now, he has just been struggling with the bat. The Mets had to bring up Brett Beatty, and it's nice to see the young guys contributing. It's nice to see him contribute. It's nice to see Francisco Alvarez, who has struggled up here at the Major League level. And if I'm the Mets, I understand that Tomas Nido is a good backup catcher, and the Mets want to see. And I know Showalter is loyal to what Nido did last year as a part-time, full-time catcher. Mets need to see more of Francisco Alvarez to see if he's the real deal. They need to see more of Brett Beatty. Get these young guys some experience. Get these young guys in the lineup because that's the future. And eventually maybe even see someone like Mark Vientos come up here or even Ronnie Mauricio come up here down the road. So 19 games in, the Mets are 12-7. And as I said in my preview at the start of the year for this Mets team, if you're a Met fan, it's okay if the Mets are not in first place. It's okay if the Mets are not skyrocketing the way the Tampa Bay Rays were at the start of the year, going 13-0 to start the season. You want the Mets right now to keep pace, which is exactly what they're doing, take care of series, win games, win series after series, and take care of business. And so far they've done that, especially over the last week. Right now they are only 2 games back going into Thursday's game against the Giants. They're only 2 games back of the Atlanta Braves. They're right in the thick of it, and that's exactly where you want to be. And that's fine. 12-7 is just fine as far as I'm concerned. The biggest concerns for the Mets right now as we head towards the end of April is the starting rotation. That's number one, starting rotation, and the taxing of the lack of length from the starting rotation on that bullpen. To me, that's the biggest concern. Of course, if the offense goes into another funk, that'll be another story. But right now, the offense is hitting pretty well at this moment in time. So we'll see how it goes. This road trip so far has been incredibly successful. 5-1 so far on the road trip. 4 more to go. We'll see how it takes place in San Francisco. Like and subscribe, and we will talk to you next time, folks.